Here
Sweet.
we go. Aram, thank you so much for being here. Cheers to you. Thanks very much
Thanks for having
for
me, Doug. Cheers. Yep.
thanks very much for being here, man. Like I
No
said,
problem.
one of the benefits of lockdown was getting to train with people I don't often get to train with, and I realized I'm quite unplugged from kind of the London scene of
Yep.
yoga because I live just a little bit out of London, so I
Okay.
don't tend to go in that much. So it's been fabulous in the sense that I've got to practice with people such as yourself, and like
Awesome.
be opened up to these new styles of yoga that I've not maybe seen, and new
Mm-hmm.
people. I remember you obviously, as I looked into it, and as I could tell from the amount of people in your class, this isn't your first time teaching yoga. This is
No, I've been doing it a little while now.
yeah.
Just
Do you want to
coming
give
up
us some
to yeah.
background? How long and where you started out?
Well, I've been teaching full time nearly 10 years now. I think it's just over 9 years. I used to be an architect, so I
Ah,
studied and qualified and worked as an architect for a little while. And I started practicing as most kind of men do. A long time ago, I bust my knee up. I mean, I wasn't particularly athletic or anything. That's part of the reasons why I bust my knee. But I had a friend invite me to a yoga class. I did that for a bit. Healed my knee. I had like ACL reconstruction.
mm-hmm.
And then yeah, and I kind of let it slide for a while, and I took up some other bits and bobs, and then I hurt myself again. And yoga was kind of like the only physical activity that I could kind of engage in safely around that time. So yeah, I don't know, about, yeah, 16, 15, about 16 odd years ago, I kind of was practicing a little more regularly while still kind of working as an architect. And yeah, it just took over a little bit. I practiced a little too much, got a little too deep into the sort of philosophy of it,
Mm-hmm.
and started questioning a lot of things in my life. And so yeah, I kind of did a teach training. I mean, I never planned on becoming a teacher, honestly. I just I did it to learn. I did it to kind of just deepen my practice a bit. Did a TT, and then yeah, and I kind of just started picking up opportunities to teach, and thought this is fun. And I wasn't really enjoying the office job so much, and then yeah, and the next thing I know, I'm in it, fully in
So I
it.
mean,
So
now you're obviously you're pretty well known in these
yep,
circles. I was introduced to you by Julie McClellan,
yep,
who was a big advocate for you. She was like, "You've got to do his
awesome.
classes." So you got a
She's
big
great.
fan in Julie, and
Appreciate it.
I
Thanks,
wanted
Julie.
to jump back to something that you were saying about how you shifted from the office job. Interesting enough, the last person I
Yeah.
had on here was David Cam, and he also used to be an architect. Um,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No, I know David.
yeah, yeah. So he
Yeah.
was an architect originally too, before you came into this. Did you find the shift to teaching an easy one in terms of
Um.
lifestyle and as well as money? Because that's kind of the elephant in the room no one really talks about when it comes to yoga
Yeah.
teaching.
No. Well, basically, so the shift. I mean, like, I've always. I mean, I taught on and off all sorts of things since I was like fairly young. So I'm like, teaching wasn't that much of a challenge for me in that sense, and I was pretty grounded in quite a strong practice. So I've got a teacher, a chap called Stewart Gilgrist, who you might be familiar
Mm-hmm.
with. He's pretty much been my teacher for most of this whole thing. So kind of I knew the practice pretty well enough to be able to transmit that. In terms of the actual shift from, I mean, it was kind of around the time when the architectural world was taking a bit of a dip, so the whole sort of financial world was going a bit down. So I was kind of finding myself a little bit in between jobs. And at the time, thankfully, I was able to kind of basically live with my mum. So yeah, no, the first, I mean, I kind of basically I recorded most of my classes that I've taught. Like the first year or so, I wasn't making any money at all, really. But luckily, I was pretty low maintenance, and I didn't have to pay rent. So I just managed to sort of ride that out for a little while. And thankfully, I kind of got into teaching around the time when there weren't so many kind of male teachers for starters, not many teachers, like the whole sort of rocket thing hadn't kicked off properly. So just
Mm.
teaching strong physical classes, I was a bit fortunate to get my foot in the door in a few studios like Try Yoga quite early on. So no, I mean, like, I didn't make much money for the first couple of years. And then, I mean, but like one of the things I've learned, particularly from Stu, is just like as a yoga teacher, um, consistency is kind of everything. And actually sort of, you've kind of got to find a balance where you can kind of afford to pay the bills, but also just showing up and teaching is kind of how it works. I mean, same as practicing, you just kind of show up, you do it, trying to expect too much from it. And that's kind of that's kind of how I've done it. Like, it just and honestly, like I mean, it still doesn't really feel like work. I mean, it can be a little sort of, I mean, it's weird. It was definitely like the first few months, the first year or so, it was pretty weird. I quite often find myself standing in the middle of a room of people thinking like, what's going on? How did I end up? How do I end up here? What is this? Why is everyone listening to what I'm saying? But yeah, just consistent teaching, always being there. I didn't really go away for the first like year or two. I just kind of so it's always felt kind of fun. So that helps. And just showing up, just consistency, just like, not really like not getting classes covered just because I don't feel like doing it, or not taking too many holidays. I mean, I haven't like, I've taught a few retreats, but I haven't really sort of done the whole thing of just like regularly like going off somewhere for long periods. And so a little bit of consistency in it definitely goes a long way. So at least like people know like you're here in this place. I can count on you to be there to show up, and a lot of it is just showing up. And the same with like the online classes is actually like I'm not necessarily bringing anything particularly new every time I'm teaching, but it is just like showing up. So I'm showing up to the practice, I'm showing up for the students, and then vice versa. It's kind of a reciprocal thing. And that's kind of how I've always seen the practice, is like it's just something you show up to. And like there's so much amazing information on the internet. There's a wealth of knowledge. Like there's so many teachers with like decades of experience behind their belt. Like if you want to learn anything specifically, the information is there, and a lot of it's free. But it's also like it's the practice that's the teacher, really. And you're either self-practicing or like having someone guide you through it. But that's kind of how I've always seen it working. So it's just got to.
So that consistency thing is something I've heard come up so often. It's interesting you bring up the lockdown thing, because I think that's allowed someone like me who, I've got a second job. So having the opportunity, especially because my job is really all over the place. I just got a message now saying that, 1 week is now actually the next week. So forget about that week.
Right.
And that's no good as a teacher, because you're forever having to things up. So for the lockdown, was the first time ever I've been able to put on a class consistently. And it's like so many things, like you say, it's just showing up. As a teacher, you get better at teaching because you're getting into that routine, into your flow of okay. And you're also having that time you set aside to plan classes. You're building on last week. It's not like a 2-week block between the last time you taught and you're like, oh, and then in the class, you're like, that's why I don't say that. This is, you're learning your cues along the way. And so lockdown's been an interesting thing for that, to finally have that consistency. It can be sometimes hard, as you mentioned, especially when you start. Firstly, getting enough classes, because that's the real tricky part, right? Getting enough classes at the beginning to carry you through until you can get more classes to keep you afloat. Any advice you would give to people in terms of how they would get their first classes?
Well, I mean, again, like when I started teaching, it was slightly different. I mean, like just I mean, like by virtue, my association with Stewart helped a lot, because I teach very much the similar style that he does, and he's very well known. So I was already kind of in yoga, spending a lot of time in yoga studios already. And I knew a lot of other teachers, and I had a lot of good friends who were yoga teachers. So initially it was just like getting known at yoga studios, so people at the front desk know who you are. I was assisting Stu as well, which helped. So I spent like a good 3 years just like practicing and assisting him. So that helped me just kind of get a sense of like what's happening in a yoga class, and adjusting while teaching and all that business. And then like my first few classes were all covers. It was just all through like teacher friends of mine who needed the class covered. And this was also like a time when studios were a little less strict on cover lists. It was a little bit more of a case of just like, it's on the teacher. So whoever you can find to cover your class, and they'll just like say, this guy's good. And they'd be like, okay, they just take their word for it. So yeah, but like just being at yoga studio regularly helps, because at least then the people running the place will know you. Trying to get cover classes initially. I mean, obviously, but like, you know, even before you step into yoga studio, I mean, I started teaching at like the first few classes I got were like Virgin Actives and Fitness Firsts. So I taught in gyms for a bit. That was good experience, because there's not a lot of expectation on you as a yoga teacher, because that culture isn't really there yet. So that's good. And also you're kind of, you know, dealing with people who might not really know what's going on. So teaching beginners helps a lot. Teaching your friends, just finding anyone to teach first and foremost, just getting that experience of, it's like practicing. I mean, the more you do it, the more comfortable you get doing it. And then, yeah, I'm just teaching regular cover classes. You know, if people like what you're doing, you know, people find out, you might start getting classes offered to you in that respect. That's kind of how it worked for me. I just started teaching whatever I could teach. Picked up covers, did as many of those as I could. And just, yeah, consistency. And then I was offered a few classes. First big sort of main studio I started teaching at was the Power Yoga Company in Fulham. So I got a few regular classes there. That helped me get some experience. I covered and taught a bit in Darbar. Fairly early on, I got like long-term covers at Tri Yoga. So it was just a little bit like, I mean, the first thing I did was, I mean, I'm assuming this is happening a lot now, is like I just emailed like a lot of the studios that were kind of within a small radius to where I lived, and said, hey, this is my background, this is what I know, I'm available for covering classes. And thankfully I got some good opportunities early on. I appreciate it's a lot harder now, because in the short time I've been teaching, like, you know, teacher trainings have become a big business. So you know, it's quite easy to become a yoga teacher, but actually, like, I was lucky enough to have a pretty grounded, consistent practice before that. So I think it's a lot harder to get your foot in the door nowadays. But if you're kind of a regular at a studio, that helps, because at least like the people running the place will know who you are, know what you're about, know that you understand the studio. I think that's probably the easiest way for a lot of people. But again, like, it's not easy. It's not a cheap thing to be a member of a yoga studio as well. So for a lot of people, yeah, it's a tough one.
How did you establish that relationship with Stewart Gilgrist? Like, did you just do your teacher training under him, or is it someone you knew before?
Honestly, like, so I like the first few yoga classes I tried years ago, before I just like really gentle hatha classes, but very focused on breathing, and that's kind of got me interested. I started practicing with Stu because I was working for a practice in Victoria, and he was teaching at a place called the Light Center pretty regularly. And the last time I bust my knee, I'd taken up capoeira, so I was kind of got into doing some quite strong physical training, and I wasn't able to do that. And he was the first class I stumbled upon where it was intensely physical, which is like, this is good, this is what I want, this is what I need. And like, you know, I liked his vibe, his philosophy, music, you know, things he was talking about, his interest in social matters. And at a time when like he was teaching there like 4 or 5 times a week, it was pretty cheap actually. I think you could get an unlimited pass there for like £80 a month. So I was just going to his classes pretty consistently. So like 3 or 4 times a week, I'd go practice with him after work. And yeah, just by being a student for like a long time, like I didn't really know any better. I kind of thought this is how you're meant to do it. So that was that, and just sort of got to know him, became friends. Went on a retreat with him a little bit early on, but it was mostly just like hanging out. Just hanging out. We used to hang out after classes, shoot the shit. So I kind of just got to know him just by being a regular, consistent student. It's just it's quite easy to develop a relationship.
Quite a fortunate turn of events that one of the teachers that you gravitated towards was that. I thought maybe you had gone to study under him, like so many people do. They find a teacher that they really
at the time he wasn't even running teacher trainings when I did my TT. I'd already been practicing with him for a few years, and he kind of suggested I just do one. Just kind of thought you probably would, you know, benefit from it. I actually went and did my TT with a guy called Doug Svensson. I don't know if you're familiar with
I'm
David
not, but
Svensson's
I saw your
big brother. Yeah.
Your list of like inspirations. which I want to talk a few about.
Okay, yeah, no, Doug's the one I did my teacher training with at the time, and again, like I wasn't that. I mean, I knew about Ashtanga yoga. I knew some of the teachers, but again, like the information we have now isn't what we had back then. There wasn't as much of a choice of kind of interesting teacher trainings at the time. I read up on him. I found his website. He interested me because I'd figured early on, like, this whole yoga business is experiential. So someone with as much experience as he has probably got something to teach. And he was running them in Lake Tahoe, which seemed like beautiful. A nice place to go and hang out for a few weeks. Yeah. And it wasn't that expensive. Like, actually, at the time, I think it was like maybe like $3,000 all in, including flights and accommodation and food.
Wow.
And he's a proper sort of, he kind of lives it. I mean, I can kind of tell that he's one of the people that sort of lives the philosophies that he teaches. So I actually went and did my teacher training with him. But what I teach is pretty much based on everything I've learned through Stu, just by practicing with him. And that's just kind of like day in, day out, just maintain a regularish practice. And so I got certified with Doug, but Stu's kind of been my main mentor, if you call it that.
Yeah.
So
his style is rocket, right? And is the rocket sequence always
the same? He wouldn't call it that, but I mean it's his background's Ashtanga, but I mean it's not far off the rocket sequence, honestly. But yeah, it's just like a strong, fast-paced Ashtanga-based vinyasa.
Okay, and is it the same sequence every time?
It pretty much. I mean, he varies it a bit. We vary, but I mean, there's like a core to it. And there's a little room for being quite creative, but it makes it a lot more accessible and easier to teach if you teach something consistently. So yeah, I mean, there's like a core sequence to it. I mean, over the years, like I've been practicing with him since maybe like 2004 or 2005-ish. He's changed it a few times, not a lot, maybe like a couple of times, 2-3 times, and he varies a little bit. But it's essentially a fairly consistent sequence with slight variations.
I'm always intrigued by that line between variation to practice and consistency to practice, because of course they pull in two different directions,
Sure.
And as a teacher, I think sometimes we can feel like we need to bring something new every time, even if as a student we prefer to do the same thing over and over again.
No, totally. Yeah.
You feel like you're cheating people. I remember when I first started teaching, going like, I cannot teach the same sequence 2 weeks in a row. Like, people are going to be like, oh, come on, And I was like, no, totally. What am I? Am I entertainer? Am I, what is my role here? Is it supposed to show them new things or not? So interested to hear your thoughts on that.
I mean, like, the good thing about teaching the sort of sequence we teach is that it kind of encompasses a lot of aspects of like the physical practice, of concentration, of meditation, and we teach it primarily as a breathing exercise. So like Ashtanga is kind of primarily like a breathing exercise. I think that I mean, I've had the similar thoughts. I'm like, are people getting bored of what I'm teaching? And then I think, well, I've been practicing the same sort of thing for almost like, I mean, at the time I was like thinking, I've been doing this thing for about a decade now, and it's still challenging me, and I'm still learning things from it. And it gives you a good groundwork, I think, of just like of discipline, of form. And because it's a fast-paced sequence, like it's a lot safer in a lot of ways. And you get to kind of, you get to understand a lot more of the postures, even though just through repetition, like mastery in anything is just like repetition. It's like constant repetition. And then I mean, like, and then you can explode it. You can look at things in isolation. You can look at things in a lot more detail if you need to. But then you've kind of got this kind of core practice that you can build from. So I mean, like, it's an interesting one. Like, a lot of it is, I mean, I've always felt it's like the practice is what's really teaching you. And so you're just, whatever you're doing in the practice is where most of your learning comes from. I kind of feel like as a teacher, it's more about kind of having an outside eye that students don't necessarily have, or you can kind of lose perspective if you're too kind of involved in what you're doing. And then it's kind of a little bit holding space. It's a little bit guiding people through a meditation, because ultimately, I mean, my thoughts on all yoga practices, they're all meditations of one sort or another. You're either using your body to do it, or you're accessing states of meditation through other techniques and practices. So it's kind of maintaining a meditative state for students so that ultimately they can do it on their own. And then if you can kind of create a kind of consistent groundwork for people, then I think that's the main, that's what I see sort of my main job being. And then obviously, like, I mean, I haven't adjusted anyone in a long time, but there's like the physical element of the practice. There's how you assist people. And then it's just a little bit never ending. I mean, it can be, it's like, it's such a super deep practice that new things always come up, questions come up, things change, outside perspectives shift, and you're always kind of responding to that. But you've also got this core, this experience that you can transmit, and then you can build off, you can riff off, you can mess around with.
So a couple of things I want to pick up on there that you've said. One of the things you've said a few times now. One, you were saying because it's a faster pace, you feel like it's a bit safer. Is that because in terms of flexibility, because you're not sitting in the pose for a long time, it allows you?
Yeah, I mean, if you're not holding the postures for as long, it's like there's less danger of you actually, like, I mean, like, also, I mean, to stress the point is, like, it's not a beginner's practice what we're teaching as well. So, I mean, it helps that you've got some understanding of the basics. But, you know, if you're holding a posture for 3 hours, there's a lot more scope for you to hurt yourself or something to, like, and then you've also got to ask yourself, why am I holding a posture for 3 hours anyway? But if you're holding positions for not so long, alignment can suffer a little bit, but if you've got an understanding of what the alignment should be, it has, I mean, I've like, unless you're pushing it, you shouldn't really hurt yourself. And I've never really hurt myself while practicing. I've hurt myself in all sorts of other areas, doing all sorts of other stupid things, but never while practicing. So, and also, like, the practice we teach as well, it's like, it's not, I mean, there's a lot of challenging things in it, but the most consistent aspect of it is breathing and, like, maintaining a breath through the whole practice, which also acts as a kind of, as a means of you understanding whether or not you've gone too far or not too far. Because if you're finding it hard to breathe, you're probably bitten off more than you can chew. So that's kind of always been, like, one of the main stresses of, like, how to make sure what you're doing is what you should be doing. But also just by virtue of the fact that it's challenging, it's fast paced. I just feel like, if you're not holding postures for as long, it's generally safer. So it's like, you know, it's a 5 breath count, vinyasa, and the way we teach it is we teach it the same way that an Ashtanga practitioner, once they've learned the sequence, would practice it. Is like they just work their way through the sequence and maintain a flow, and that's where it becomes a meditation as well. So it's a combination of that physical part of it.
I think that's where the real advantage of a sequence that doesn't change too much comes in.
Yeah.
That people can then get into it. And I heard someone mention this about Ashtanga, is that once you know the sequence and you know the movements and the positions, now you can really start to get deeper, not in terms of necessarily depth of how physically deep, but you can start experiencing it. You don't have to, your part of your mind isn't going, okay, what do we do next? There's
your
groundwork to it that you can go, I know what we're doing next. So right now I'm here. I know I'm here for this amount of time. What changes when I do this? Does this change it? When I breathe, when I slightly stiffen up my posture, what changes in the posture, in the pose? And I think that is one of the key elements to it.
I mean, whether it's a yoga practice or any other practice where you're just completely involved in what you're doing and you're sort of moving beyond thought patterns, and that's essentially like what we're teaching in flow practices. Is actually, it's more important that you kind of access this state of meditation than really get too caught up in sort of, you know, whether or not you can wrap your feet around the back of your head or you can do that handstand. I mean, that's all part of like having something to do. I mean, ultimately, like, also I joke, I kind of say, like, ideally I'd have you all just sit in seated meditation for 90 minutes if I could, but you probably wouldn't come back. So it's good to have something to do and something to focus on, and having something challenging to focus on is good because then it demands a lot more of your attention.
So, I totally agree.
Yeah.
I think I feel the same about meditation. In terms of guided meditation, the access entry level is so much lower if you can guide someone through it, because you're helping them focus on what to think about. Ideally, like you said, you want them to be able to do these things alone, both the practice and the meditation. But it's harder when someone else is telling you to do something. It's a lot easier to focus because someone's literally mentally pointing these things and going, what about here? What about here? What about here? I guess eventually, so you can internalize these things so you can point them out later. And that's where you're saying experience is so handy, because someone who's done this for years has a myriad of different things to think about in that pose, you know? And sometimes I think, you know, I try to tell beginners sometimes the same thing. I said, you guys are lucky because these things are all new to you. You're going to be mentally invested in each pose because you're not, you know, if I say warrior two, you don't know what I mean. So you're going to have to listen to every cue I give. Someone who's kind of just started, who knows enough to know what shape to make, but not enough to be invested in the posture, it's harder for them, I think. And that's where, as a teacher, I think we really come to the fore. I wanted to ask you too, in terms of, you were talking about the role as a teacher, and something that's obviously a hot topic right now is social change. And I'm curious, having had this discussion with other yoga teachers and debates about it, not really knowing where I stand with this yet. Do you think being a teacher, well, how can I put this? Is there a responsibility of a teacher to be involved in social change as a person individually, and two, to bring it up in the class? What's your feeling on that?
And yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, like, it's like on one level, I try not to put too much weight on that sort of thing, in the sense that as a teacher, I'm presenting the students with the practice that I've been taught and I practice. And then it's like, you take from that what you will, and what you learn from that, and you apply that in your life. And hopefully, you know, whatever ripples that come about will transmit in their relationships, in their interactions, in what they do in the world. But yeah, I mean, like, we're not ascetics. We don't live in caves in the middle of nowhere, and people do kind of listen to what we say in whatever context. So I kind of feel like, you know, the role of the yogi in the modern context is to kind of make things better for everyone around them. Like, it's, you know, as human beings, it's our natural sort of drive to, I mean, I've been teaching this a little bit recently in classes, is that we're all trying to sort of rise up in some capacity. So whether it's in a spiritual endeavor, or just like, you know, people in their daily lives, or they're trying to do better for themselves, better for their families, they're trying to do better financially, or for success, or for like recognition, or whatever, like in whatever capacity, like it's a natural human impetus to want to move higher. So I think, you know, we live in a world where we're all interrelated and we're all interconnected, and our actions affect everyone around us. So I kind of feel, I mean, you know, we're as much a part of our environment as our environment is part of us. And I'm not just talking about like the natural environment, which is fundamental, but the social environment. So as people, I think I've always felt that's important. And as yogis, I don't feel that's really any different. It's I mean, part of like what attracted me to Stu's way of teaching is because that's a big part of who he is, and the things he talks about. And I've always thought that's kind of pretty fundamental. I don't lay it on too heavy in my classes, but you know, I'm affected by what happens in the world, and it comes out in the things I'm talking about, because I do, you know, part of how we teach as well is that, you know, there's a lot of non-stop chatter as well from the teacher that helps the student to kind of, you know, not be too caught up in their chatter. And when I'm talking a lot, sometimes I'll just talk about the things that are kind of on my mind and I kind of feel like are important and that's going on in the world, and particularly like at times like this when everyone's being affected by the sort of common experience that's fundamentally sort of shifting in the way we look at things. I think, but I don't see it just as a role of like yoga teachers necessarily. It's just something that I think that people everywhere should be conscious of. You know, we're all trying to make things better for ourselves on some level, and I kind of feel making things better for each other is doing that at a more fundamental level. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I said, I think the other side of that coin is these experiences encompass all of us, but they may influence us very differently. And I think the danger sometimes in class is that putting forward a particular political stance may make someone feel who isolated in a place that they maybe want to come feel safe. That's my only.
I appreciate that, but it's just like, we move through this world and we're all going to come up against experiences and places where, what does it mean to feel safe, and how do we negotiate that, and what, this is life. Like, we're going to come up against people who we fundamentally disagree with. We're going to come up with situations that we're going to find really uncomfortable and scary, and we're not necessarily going to resonate with it. I'm not saying we should be abusive in the way we're kind of presenting ourselves, but each teacher has their own particular perspective of a practice that comes across in the way they teach. And I feel like who they are as human beings is also fundamental. And if people don't jive with that, then that's okay. Like, it's not like this is my way or not. Like, one of the things that I feel what I teach is kind of quite formal, but it's also a little bit like take it or leave it. Like, from what I say and what you understand, there's a bit of a gap, and I'm not expecting you to agree with everything I say, or to just feel pressured to do as you're told. It's not like, that's not how things work. I think just people should be encouraged to, that's the good thing about doing, again, like with a challenging practice, is there's going to be aspects of it that you're going to find really uncomfortable and really unpleasant, and it's like, well, what do you do with that? How do you kind of soften around that? How do you, are you going to push against that? Are you not going to push against that? And I feel our relationships with people as well are a large part to do with that. It's a funny world, like the whole sort of yoga world, yoga teaching world. It's pretty strange.
I think it's strange because, as you said, we find ourselves in this unusual position where people are listening to us, not just listening. We're not trainers, No. My friend that takes a CrossFit class, no one's expecting them to give enlightenment.
No, exactly.
No one's going like, yeah, I can clean and snatch, but tell me, how should I be living my life? No one,
of course
whereas
not.
we come in and they're like, yeah, thanks, that's great, Warrior 3, but tell me, should I be vegan or not? And you're like, wait, fuck, is like, it's hard. And
well, there are like, obviously there's tenets of like what it, of a yogic life and the philosophy behind what we're teaching, that is based on like these sutras and all this other stuff, which again, it's all like open to interpretation to some degree as well. Like, we're not all Sanskrit scholars, we're not all like having, like, and we're not all gonna like hide in a cave and live that life in that way, or what it means to like do it as a householder. Like, philosophy is a part of it, which is kind of, which is what attracted me to the practice, is because it's not just about like training the body, it's about breath work, it's about mind work. So it's kind of like, what are you looking for in your practice? Some people just are just doing it because it, helps ease the stress and helps with aches and pains, and just gives them something to do that takes their mind off whatever, and that's great. Some people treat it as a bit of a holiday from reality. I've always kind of felt that it's meant to kind of bring you more into reality if you're doing it correctly.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah. So and then so it's just like, but then honestly, like, if my personal trainer is like giving me some interesting truths about the world we live in, that's cool as well. Like,
I'm with you. I think
everyone's got an opinion.
My point is, with them, no one expects it of them. They can, and that's a bonus. Yeah. That's a yoga teacher.
And there are plenty of teachers that don't, and that's fine. And then the thing about the world we're in today is there's so much choice now. You can go to a teacher that's.
But I agree with you. And certainly, before going any further, can I say, Aram, from your class, I certainly got that vibe. There's a matureness about people that are strong in their opinions, but also humble at the same time. And that's a fine line to walk, right? Where you go, in my experience, from what I've seen, from the things I know, this is how I see it. I also am open to the fact that I could be totally wrong.
Oh,
and
no, totally.
That is, you don't find that all that often. Either people are kind of like wishy-washy in their thoughts, or they are so hard pressed on what they think there's no other answer.
Of course.
And I think it's important to allow that, like you said, I think you put it beautifully, the space between what I'm saying and meaning and what you understand. There may be
always going to be like
water like light going through water, that refraction.
No, totally. Because like sometimes I have students coming up to me and asking me something about something I said, and I'm like, wow, like what I thought I was trying to communicate to you and what I understand is like there's been a massive shift. It's like there's a lot to it,
But I agree with you that I think as a teacher, we lose something very important if we don't put a bit of ourselves into the teaching.
Yeah, of course.
At that point, what is the difference? If you're not going to put some of you into the teaching, what is the difference between you teaching and there being the graph of what moves we should be doing today? Like,
no, exactly.
You're losing that humanness. And if we are to believe that we have a spark of the divine in us, and it may be quite unique from someone else, we should help people find their own. And
absolutely.
And that's one thing I definitely agree with what you're saying before, and that's highlighted in your homepage too. You talk about uplifting yoga to uplift. And I think this, when it comes to what I think about in terms of political views in a class, I think I should be asking the right questions to people to allow them to come to their decision, so they don't go blindly through life, so they can come to a decision that's been formulated in their mind, and they've accessed something, as you said, reality, even more intense than what maybe they normally do, to make them really look at things in a accurate way, or as accurate as possible way, and go from there.
I mean, I in terms of like the practice I'm presenting, I'm like, okay, this is the way we're going to do it, and this might be like, this is what might be what I think, but I really tried to avoid sort of actually telling people like, this is what you must do and this is what you must think, because ultimately it's about moving beyond all that stuff. And I get it, like the practice on its own without any of that stuff is really pretty powerful on its own. And as people, we're always kind of looking for answers, and I also understand from someone who wasn't necessarily that interested in vegetarianism or veganism way back when, or any of the sort of things that I'm trying to sort of embody in my life like now, is that having a practice like this where it can kind of shift your perspective so fundamentally can be quite unnerving for a lot of people. A lot of us are looking for answers in some form or another. So if you come across someone very charismatic who purports to have answers that you're seeking, it can be quite easy if you just go, oh, okay, no, that makes sense. I'll go with that. And then all of a sudden you're like telling people, no, it should be this way. And there's just too many ways of looking at the subject. And I'm as guilty as the next person to just get like stuck in patterns of thinking about things. And
it's funny, I'm obsessed with watching documentaries on cults, because I'm so intrigued by it. But you, like you said, you see how in a way it's kind of just a relinquishing, right? Going, fuck, I've got so many questions, and as I get older, there seems to be more questions and less answers. This guy, who normally is quite good looking, is telling me that he's got the answer. I'm in. Like, can I stop thinking about it? And I can see how attractive it is to people, how they just go, I'm just gonna go with this guy.
We do teach surrender in the practice, and I guess like in a way there's something to gain from that, but most people in that position are usually taking advantage.
As Joe Rogan points out, for some reason they always have to sleep with all the females. Like, that's somehow, whatever the cult is, that's somehow written in. It doesn't matter what it is. Like, just a side note here, there it is.
Big time. And it's a fun. Like, I joke in classes that I'm starting my own cult, and for a monthly subscription you can join it. But yeah, I mean, it's honestly, like I still sort of question my role as a yoga teacher and my role in this practice quite regularly. It's I slipped into it because I kind of felt like what I was doing, even though it was worthwhile, was kind of weird. Just like the whole human experience of like living and working and 9 to 5ing seemed kind of absurd, and like what we do it for and our motivations. And then, so that all seemed kind of like absurdity has kind of driven me quite quite heavily in all of this. And I was like, okay, this is kind of silly, but it seems to have lots of good benefits. This, I'll roll with this for a while, but I do kind of question like there's definitely like a certain silliness to what I do as well, which I feel is kind of important. I think like humor and really appreciating that the fundamental human condition is kind of ridiculous. Is also a big part of what I do. And then so like stuff like cults is also like, on one hand, it's like it can be really horrible and destructive, but it does embrace this kind of ridiculousness of where we are as humans and what motivates us, and
I think that's the thing. As we relook at things, as we look at activities and what we do and what we spend a lot of our time thinking about, we can go like, what am I doing here?
Oh yeah, no.
But I guess no matter what we do, if we condense it down, it can seem futile. When you think about any sport we play, it's insane. We make up these parameters to then like to make a game out of it, and I think you're a big fan of Alan Watts, and he's a big fan of saying, looking at life as this dance, not as this destination of going like, look, you're in it. You roll with it while you're in there.
Totally.
You said that Doug Svensson guy, you said he lived it. Could you just expand on that a bit more?
Well, I mean, it was interesting. Like when I went and did my teacher training, I think he was just over 60 at the time. And he was very much like raw foodie. He's a big sort of surfer. Like, I mean, actually, like his whole like his main angle was just about like he loved being in nature, and one of the things that stuck with me on teach training is like we'd have like daily, because we were in Tahoe, so he'd take us up into the mountains and on like big hikes, and he was more concerned. He wasn't that bothered if you like came to practice or not. Like he was more, he'd get more bummed out if you didn't come out on the hike with him. So he's very much just like about his relationship with nature and energy and life, and he kind of didn't seem to sort of have a fixed abode. He would just sort of travel and teach, and there was kind of like something a bit nomadic about him. And he was very involved in the practice, like, and it just really struck me. I mean, I guess like on one level it's just his personality a bit, but he was super energetic for a man of his age. Like, I mean, he was doing everything. I mean, he had an assistant, but he was like cooking for us, leading us through practice. He lectures on just like healthy living, cross training. He was a big kind of proponent of that, like yoga isn't like an all-encompassing kind of physical activity that's going to keep you healthy. It's good to do other things. And yeah, he was very much just like, and then also like raw foodism and veganism was a massive part of what he was teaching us. But yeah, I think it's just his attitude, and it was kind of childlike, and just it was very clean living, but at the same time like quite adventurous in like all his other pursuits. So I kind of there was something that was pretty amazing about him. And I think he's about 70 odd now, and he's still teaching. He's still popping handstands everywhere like a lunatic. But
that's what drew me last year. I think I've gone to the yoga practice very similar to you. Injury, I've actually had 3 ACL reconstructions, so that knee is in a bad place. And then I got into yoga, and it was same as you. I was like, oh, here's this thing I can do that's working all the muscles. I get to celebrate the body, but in quite a safe parameter. When I did gymnastics, that parameter was much smaller in terms of where the safe place was. And then I started to realize the longevity capacity of it. I was like, oh, here's something I can keep working the body, keep it ticking over, and keep it pretty healthy. You mentioned Doug saying about cross training. Are there any other sports that you still like to do now that you do alongside your yoga?
Well, I mean, in lockdown, not so much. I mean, I cycle a lot as a means of getting around London. I very recently started just going to indoor climbing, just as a little do something different, like to hang off things. And I just got quite into just watching lots of mountaineering documentaries.
Free solo?
From free solo, but from just like there's lots of really interesting documentaries about just like expeditions of like trying to climb Everest, all these other like crazy mountains. Like, so I think Jimmy Chin, who did free solo, made another documentary called Meru, where they climb this massive. It's a pretty amazing documentary where they try and climb a mountain in Pakistan, I think it is, this unclimbed peak. But yeah, just that whole kind of spirit adventure was quite attractive to me. I bought a skateboard the other day, I don't know if that's safe. Don't know what I'm doing. I grazed my knee today. So I tried to mess around and do some other things, but mostly like yoga and cycling is kind of my main thing. And then in between I try and play about with some other stuff. But I'm not that sort of, I'm not super sort of like I must do all these things, and for this whole encompassing thing is like actually I get enough from what I'm doing right now. But I like to try new things and I like to play. So that's where I'm at the moment.
And can you tell me, how often do you practice? How often is your like physical practice?
On most, well, actually, I mean, I still go and see Stu when he was teaching in the studio, so I still go and see him like 2-3 times a week. I don't do the full-on physical stuff as regularly, but again, like 3-4 times a week, and then in between, I'll do some just a bit more mellower, slower variations, and then sometimes, depending on like how my body feels or how I feel, I'll mix it up. But yeah, I mean, but there was a time where I was doing it like nearly every day. But there's also just like, I teach you consistent practice, but I'm also kind of wary about just repeating the similar motions over and over and over again, and how that could be detrimental to your body. So I try to mix it up now a lot more.
It's interesting you say that. I did that 108 sun salutations.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of feedback both from yourself. Yeah. Of course, we spoke about that. Quite a few people got back to me about their hamstrings. I had said beforehand, knowing full well that the lower back for me is the one from the up dog. So I'd said at the beginning when we went through, I was like, look, if you prefer baby cobra or something here, don't think you have to go to the deep back bend each time. But you notice how that repetitive action, you're like,
yeah, of course.
What is going on?
No, totally.
So there's definitely a mindfulness that has to come with it, that repetitive actions can also
and
be
I think it's important. I mean, like, our bodies are designed to move, and prehistorically they've had to perform a lot of actions for us to kind of like manage and survive in the wild. And the yoga practice are amazing because, like, for me as well, like there was a long period where I wasn't that physically active, so I think it's great in that it gets a lot of people that probably wouldn't be moving. So that's already like a great benefit. But I think after a certain time and consistency of it, it is also quite important that you use your body in a lot of different ways. I think that ultimately for kind of like physical health and well-being, it's also quite important to just mix it up.
I want to shift questions now, Aram, to your online classes and how you went about offering them. Were you surprised with the take-up?
I was amazed. It was. I mean, like I with the start of lockdown, I think with most yoga teachers, I was a little bit like, I'm self-employed, so it was a bit like, shit, what's happening now? Like, I'm not, so just the fact, and I was kind of, I've always been a little bit like, not techno geeky, but I spend a lot of time messing around on the internet on my laptop. So it was quite easy for me to set up. But I think I was blown away by obviously the attendance, and but it just kind of went to show like how much of a need there was for it as well, just for people to feel sort of grounded and connected and be able to kind of come together and do this thing. So it was pretty amazing, honestly, and it was great for me as well, just like going with all this thing, just being able to do something, and to keep kind of working and keep teaching was, people sort of thank me for helping them out, but I'm like, honestly, like having people being able to show up to class and me just like, okay, I'm here, I'm going to do this together, has been also a massive help at my end.
As we were talking about absurdity and finding meaning, like when lockdown hit in, there's certain personalities that are like, sweet, get to watch Netflix all the time. Other personalities are like, like I got to do something.
Yeah, no, I mean, no, totally. I mean, I'm all right. I'm quite fine being a hermit, and I've been living at my girlfriend's in central London, so actually it's been really nice. Like we've pretty much had central London, like Soho, as our playground. It's been completely dead. And now life's coming back. It's kind of weird and slightly horrible because everyone's just getting wasted on the streets now. But so I mean, I'm quite good at just kind of like staying in and occupying myself, but also just like being able to teach and actually just being able to connect with people has been and just like maintain that. Well, I say dialogue, it's mostly me talking at people, but it's been
But
great.
I've
just
heard a lot of
just and it's fine. I've been seeing like people that like never really I've like had new students come that I never really taught in person who've been coming regularly, and it's a whole new world. I mean, I'm not seeing into people's lives in a way that I never did. Kids and pets, and that's all really fun. And
it's literally like
and I get to learn
Windows.
people's names as well. Another thing is like, because like my physical classes in the real world can get quite busy sometimes, and they can get a little impersonal just because of numbers and the context and the way we teach, and sometimes we just miss catching people's names, and it gets to a point sometimes where you're like, I feel bad for asking now. You've been coming to class for like 6 years and I don't really want to I don't actually know your name. So learning people's names has been cool. It's been lovely. It's been a whole new world. It's totally weird. It's, I thought like teaching yoga in person was weird, this is a whole different kind of weird. But it kind of suits the way I teach as well, and being able to, like, I can still play music through the laptop, so I can kind of just mess around with music and still create the vibe. It's been nice. I've definitely been having a good time.
I think it definitely suits your style from what I've seen in terms of the way you talk, the way you kind of joke, and you're far more this is what's funny about you saying it's more monologue than dialogue, but it is a dialogue. You approach it like a dialogue. You're almost making people, you can hear them almost answering in your head as you carry on.
No, totally. But I mean, I can see what they're doing. So like their responses by what they're doing with their bodies. So obviously I can respond to that, as long as they got the cameras turned on. And it's like, I'll definitely like, I'm glad that this has become a thing as well, because it's just nice to kind of have the freedom of, as a teacher as well, just to kind of do something independently, is really nice. And just for having that sort of direct communication between teacher and students, been great. It's definitely, I mean, I honestly, I don't like practicing so much through Zoom. Like I've practiced with Stu a few times on Zoom, and it's great to just like reconnect with him. Me personally, I think maybe I've just spent a lot too much time on it, just kind of professionally. And then in my practice, I kind of prefer just to sort of tune out and not have my laptop near me while I'm doing it. But as a teacher, it's been an amazing tool, and I think it's probably going to stick around. I think definitely, like, there's a need for people just to have the convenience to be able to sort of, because it's hard for a lot of us. I mean, me included, just to kind of practice on your own anyway at the best of times, and just have someone to kind of guide you through it, or just have that outside eye. So I mean, who knows what the future holds for studios right now? It's not looking. I've been hearing of like smaller studios going under, and it's
tough time. Yeah,
it's very difficult.
As anyone who's struggling with capital, anyone who's just invested in something, bad news, man.
Totally.
And like, if you can't keep yourself afloat, and now I think is in the last month we've just started to see the knock-on effect. My friend is a studio owner, and he was explaining how when you go back to running, you're running at 100% cost. You're running at 110% of the new protocols, but you're running also at a 40% capacity.
Yeah, no, exactly. So
you're in trouble, like, now.
Especially like in London, where overheads are like insane as it is. It's tough. I mean, unless they've kind of got the backup and maybe like the reserves, financial reserves, to kind of keep them afloat, it's going to be a weird time. Because then obviously, like, I'm still pretty apprehensive about going back to teaching in person, because I don't really know. Like, as far as I can tell, like, the situation hasn't changed that much. COVID's still a thing, and as people start coming into contact more, and I feel like personally I have to be a bit worried, because I've got an elderly mother who kind of relies on me a little bit, so I'm trying to minimize my contact so I'm not like putting her at risk. So it's going to be interesting, because confidence is going to be a thing. And then obviously, like, the way we teach yoga, it's really sweaty. It's a lot of heavy breathing. And in an enclosed space is like the ultimate sort of ground for transmission, really. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I think it's going to take a while for us to really sort of see what the world looks like once everyone's back and interacting a bit more fully. And then how things evolve from there is definitely
How are things going to be for you then? You say apprehensive to go back to studio. Are you going to still be offering your online classes? Is that a standard that's going to stay in place?
I think I'll definitely stick with at least a few of these, because I've kind of set up a schedule now, and then like sort of just building classes is you know, it's like teaching regular classes. So I'm quite happy in my routine doing this. I'll probably go back to teaching maybe like a couple at first, in person, because like a lot of studios are also talking about like running physical classes and live streaming at the same time. And in sort of in physical classes, I adjust a lot. Like a big part of how I teach in person involves like physical adjustments, which I won't be able to do. So a lot of that will have to be verbal. But I'm just gonna play it by ear a little bit. I'll probably go back to maybe one or two, and then see how it goes. But I'll definitely keep, because it's been awesome. I've been able to like connect with students who like left London a long time ago, and now from like, you know, I've had students from Japan to Dubai to funky parts of the US just logging in. So being able to maintain that's awesome. So I think for the time being, I think this is probably the safest thing we could be doing. I know it's not the same. It's not the same in terms of like the energy of being in a room with a bunch of people, and the vibe of just actually being there in person. But also just considering how uncertain everything is right now, it's still a great way to just maintain a practice, to maintain a relationship, and to keep things going until we feel it's a little more manageable, you know.
I think you've hit on something there. That's the connectivity of it, in terms of instead of following a video on YouTube, to be in a room with someone, even though you're not in a room with someone, you're doing it along with someone. There's something I think that draws us in. Certainly, someone like me, I'm quite social, and I like to be around people. So ideally, I'll choose being in the physical space over anything else.
Of course.
Probably some people
it's a whole different thing. There's and it's also like, you know, internet content has been around for a long time, and I've had like, you know, videos of all the old school Ashtangas just on my laptop since I started practicing, just because I wanted to see like, what is this, like, how does this work? But in terms of like practicing along to that, it's quite difficult. Like, and that's partly why I don't demonstrate much in person or when I'm teaching on a screen, because if you're looking at me, you're not doing it. And because I feel it's experiential, I feel like you should just be doing it. So having a teacher that can like lead you more verbally than visually is really important. Because if you're staring at the screen, it's just, you know, you might as well just be sitting and watching Netflix. But so I've kind of worked quite hard to just kind of maintain that ability to just guide people through a practice, and then just let the practice do its thing. Because I mean, like I said, there's tons of like amazing, like super free content as well out there. Like I always encourage my students just to get online and just look at some of the great classic teachers from just the books they published, or just like videos of them practicing and teaching. And that'll give you like ideas and inspiration, and open things up to you. But also at the same time, it's great to be able to just come together. You know, there's like a whole bunch of people. And I can see it, like, you know, I'm sitting there, people scattered everywhere, but they're all in sync. They're all like breathing together, they're moving together. And that's amazing. And it's nice to kind of feel that connection, no matter how kind of separated you are. You're in your room, you're in your garden or whatever, and you got your iPhone or your laptop out. But I think people definitely do appreciate like being there with other people in like involved in the same experience together.
There's certainly something about that. And I think to a degree, this COVID thing makes people feel like that too, that we've all gone through this together. I'm certainly
totally.
This is unprecedented. But for the first time, everyone is. It's not like, oh, you guys in the UK or you guys in the US. It's like everyone.
No. It's literally, no, it's bizarre.
And, you know, having spoken about the classes, do you want to tell people when they can log in, how they do it, what's the best place to catch you and find out what you are up to and what you're offering?
So my website is aramyoga.com. Instagram, Facebook, all that business, it's Aram Yoga. It's all me. I advertise all that stuff up there. If you just go to my website, it should be pretty self-explanatory. I've got an online schedule. You just click on the class and you hop on. You just get a link for it, and we're away. I'll come see you in your little rectangle somewhere.
Yeah, that I mean,
weird bald man shouting at you from a distance.
I'm still intrigued by it. Like you're saying, you see into these different worlds, and like you see different things happening. Like you say, like a dog comes into a room there.
Yeah.
That guy is talking
totally.
to his girlfriend. You're like, oh,
I've got to know people's pets, some people's pets better than I've known students over. And you know, and some of the kids are hilarious. The kids will come get involved and start like jumping about. I'd want someone's child just like with a big handful of green goo in her hand, just like showing me her green goo. It was it's mad.
Fantastic. Well, Aram, thank you so much for taking the time out. I look forward to seeing you in a class virtually, or I would prefer
Thanks, man.
when you're back in the studio, because I'm a big fan of that. And keep doing your good stuff, man. See you soon.
Appreciate you. Thanks, man. Take care.
Cheers, bye.